What's up, everybody? It's me. Thank you for coming back or for visiting my channel in the first place. I love having you guys here. My name is Ariana. I am an author. I am a huge folklore nerd, and I am also just a big reader. And today I wanted to share with you guys the books that I read in February. Before I get to that, I just wanted to share that I started a Patreon where I am writing really stupid, purposely bad, very silly romance and erotica stories. And if you would like to take a look at those and see if you would like them, go ahead and check out the link in the description. It's a great way to support the channel, to give yourself a laugh, and just to have a good old time. So yeah, with that, please like and subscribe. Let's go ahead and talk about the books I read this month. So, spoiler alert, I didn't have a very good month reading wise. And before I start talking about the books themselves, I want to just say, because there's going to be a ton of complaining, I am not here to shit on other writers. I don't do that because as an author, I know it would really, really suck for someone to be saying terrible things about me or questioning my talent or wondering why my parents didn't ship me off in a River Moses style rather than letting me ever touch a keyboard. I'm not interested in doing any of those things. And also, I just never know who I'm going to run into. And if I ever run into any of these writers, I don't want them being like, I know what you said. So I'm not going to do that. I am going to be honest about the works themselves, what I didn't like, but I am not going to like call anybody's talent into question or talk about how much I hate these people. Like, it's nothing personal. That being said, let's get into the first book of the month. And that book was The Last Wish, which is the first book of the Witcher series by Andrzej Sapkowski. I hope I said that right. And this book was such a disappointment to me. I am a huge fan of Witcher. I came into the fandom thanks to Witcher 3, the video game. And I mean, I've named a number of my pets after people from the story, Ciri, Yennefer, Kira. I really, really liked the show, actually. The one on Netflix, I know that that's kind of a hot take. Some people didn't. I actually liked the first 2 seasons, but then when they switched Henry Cavill out for Cuddy McJosh Sharpie, I really don't remember his name. I wasn't a huge fan of him, so I kind of didn't watch after that. So I really was hoping that these books were going to hit a special place for me, especially since on paper, this is a story that should work for me, of all people. I love folklore, and the Witcher books are about a guy who is basically hired to hunt and kill creatures in Slavic folklore, from Slavic folklore. And I was just thinking, this has to be it for me, and it just wasn't. Honestly, the writing style just did not work for me. There were like 5-6 page long arguments between 2 characters without anything happening, just way too long for me to be reading 2 people just sitting and arguing. I felt like some of the descriptions were either too long or not enough. And this book is a perfect example of something that is a pet peeve of mine for people who want to work in series. If you're gonna write a book that's gonna be in a series, I should be able to read one book and have that stand alone. I don't like when I'm reading a book and things are being brought up and I'm like, this never happened. When did this happen? What happened? And it's like, oh, you'll find out in the second book. I don't like that. I don't mind if there are certain things that are left unsaid or certain loops that are left unclosed, but I don't like when someone is like, it was kind of like that time that she told me that thing back in the fall. And I'm flipping back and forth through the book looking for this conversation and it never happened. And I can tell that you're doing that so that I have to buy your second book to find out what the hell was said in the fall. I don't like it. So there was that. And then it was just, there were a lot of redundancies, a lot of things that were said over and over again, multiple times where things were described the same way in rapid succession. It just really wasn't for me. And I found that it was not grabbing me. It wasn't interesting enough. I struggled. I struggled to get through this. It wasn't the worst book I'd ever read. I got through it pretty easily because it was a quick book, but I wasn't having fun with it. I definitely had a lot of moments where I was kind of thinking to myself that this could be so much better, and it just wasn't. It didn't live up to the potential, I feel. So I wound up giving this book about 2.5 stars, I believe, because the folklore aspect, when it really wanted to focus on folklore things like elves and a Rusalka, which I mentioned in my last video, things like that, a Bruxa, it was very interesting and much more fun to read, but some of the other things just really weren't working for me. And there were a couple times where if it hadn't been for the fact that I'd seen the show, I would have had no idea what the hell anybody was talking about. I don't know. I'm not going to say that I don't recommend this because there's, everybody changes, your miles may vary, but I didn't enjoy this book. So sadness. Up next, in my last video, I actually put every Dungeon Crawler Crawl book together. I will not be doing that in this video because I feel like each one kind of had different levels of interest for me. I was on book number 4, which is The Gate of the Feral Gods in the Dungeon Crawler Crawl series. And again, this one kind of fell a little short for me. It was not bad. I actually don't think that Matt Dinniman is capable of putting out a bad book necessarily, but it was more convoluted, less fascinating. I felt like I wasn't following the story as closely and as excitedly as I had been the first 3. It really just wasn't the strongest book in the series. It did introduce us to one of my favorite characters, Samantha. I am not going to spoil you by telling you anything about Samantha. I think that she is worth finding out on your own if you are going to read the series, but she is hilarious. I had a blast with her, but it was just kind of like the story itself just was not grabbing me like I had hoped that it would. It was a fun enough listen, definitely was still something that was enjoyable for me to get into, but it was by far my least favorite book of the series. And even the ending I felt was a little all over the place, to the point where I was trying to figure out exactly what was going on. Even as I was halfway through listening to what was happening, I was still like 5 minutes before mentally thinking like, what did I just hear? It was a little hard for me to grasp. That being said, I feel like it's kind of like, for me, there are certain writers who, when they don't do their best, they still do better than most. And I felt like even a bad Dungeon Crawler Carl book, or a not as interesting Dungeon Crawler Carl book, is better than all the others, or is better than most. So I actually still liked the book. I would still like to own it when I eventually get the whole series, but it would not be the one that I would be the most excited to read, if I'm being honest. And this one, for me, got 3 stars. So, which for a Dungeon Crawler Carl book, for me, is pretty low, but that's about where it would be. Next up is my first DNF of the year. I had been doing so well, and I think I had been just coasting too much, and whoever's in charge of what books I read out there, the TBR gods, were like, she's getting a little too big for her britches. We got to give her something that she can't stand. And that was Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb. This was suggested in the Books That Feel Like This subreddit, and it sounded like it could have been interesting. I don't read a lot of pirate books, but I have read high fantasy in the past. I really used to love Terry Goodkind's books. Specifically, Wizard's First Rule was my favorite book for many years. So I was very interested in reading something that was kind of in that same high fantasy playing field. And I'm not put off by long books. Wizard's First Rule was 832 pages, and this was back in the day when we didn't have Kindles. I'm old. And I remember really still having a great time reading it. I had no problems. This one, though, someday I am going to do another video about tropes, and I'm just gonna focus on fantasy because there are some that drive me crazy, and this book committed so many what are, for me, fiction sins in the first 3 chapters that I could not read further. For those of you who do not know, Ship of Magic is a book about a pirate, a woman who's a pirate. She runs a ship that is built out of what I think is called wizard wood, and the wizard wood comes to life once I think 3 people in a bloodline have died. And so she's kind of waiting for her next family member to die so that this ship comes to life, and she wants to be the leader of the boat, captain, whatever. I don't know much more than that because I quit reading after 3 chapters. And that was because in those 3 chapters, I was introduced to, I believe, 10 separate characters who I was expected to remember. And then I understand that when you are writing a fantasy novel, especially high fantasy, especially in a world that you built, that there is going to be lingo that people aren't going to catch up on, that they're going to have to figure out as they go, that you're going to have different ways that people speak, that there are going to be places that are going to just be mentioned, and you kind of want to drop the person into this world and make this world feel rich and real. I get it, but also, if you are going to just start throwing lore at me and expect me to catch on to where we are just automatically, it's not going to happen. I'm sorry, it's not. I'm going to sit there and be like, who the hell is this? What the hell is that? Where the hell does this go? How does that happen? Why does that happen? Help. It makes it very hard for me. And it feels like, I know this isn't a fair thing to say, but it feels like the author is trying too hard. It feels like we are being dropped into this world blind, and that's not fun. I don't like feeling like I am reading words that mean nothing to me. People, and I want to make it clear real quick in a side tangent that I understand that this is hard, right? It is very hard to toe the line between exposition and giving people way too much exposition, just as it is hard to walk that line between treating the audience like they already know where they're at and explaining what's happening. And Ship of Magic just was doing a lot of just assumption with very little exposition. And the exposition could have come later, but I feel like if you're hitting me with many, many punches, if you're like this person and this person and this person and this thing and that thing, and by the time you finish, I'm like, I don't know what the hell just happened. And you want me to continue reading something where I have been overloaded with information I don't understand. It was very, very hard for me. And every time that I looked at that little corner of my Kindle and saw that I had read like 10 pages and only gone up a percentage, I was like, I can't do this. So, for me, the sign to DNF is just when I start daydreaming about when the book is over, it's time for me to stop. So I stopped. And I know some people are going to disagree, but I count it towards my reads for the year because I wasted 2 days of my time. So gotta get something out of it. Anyway, on to the next book. Next up was a book called The House Witch by, I hope I'm saying this right, Delemhach. This is the person's pen name, so I don't know if I'm saying it right. But it's called The House Witch. It is also the first book of a series, and it was fine. It was suggested to me by the app Storygraph. It's especially a cool app if you like seeing visualizations of what you've been reading, how you've been progressing, how quickly you've been reading, things like that. It's actually a really fun app, and it suggested this book to me based off of some other things that I had read, and it was fine. I feel like the idea of the book is supposed to be about a guy named Finlay Ashwin, who is a house witch, and as a house witch, his magic is rooted in his home. And so his abilities are really closely tied around making people in a home feel comfortable, making them feel cozy, being able to make really good food, to make people feel full and happy. Like his whole point is turning a home into a comfortable place for everyone. And he becomes the royal cook. And it's an interesting concept. The book definitely promised to be much funnier than it was. It was like, it's a humorous fantasy. And I think I might have blown out of my nose pretty hard like once. That is part of the thing. Like, never promise that people are going to feel a certain way when they read if you can avoid it, because then if they don't, they feel like you lied. Otherwise, The book was fine. I've said that like 8 times, but that's really kind of where I was at. I felt as if I was reading like a serial fan fiction more than anything else. And it was also just kind of difficult for me to really identify with any of the characters. I felt like they were all kind of one note. Um, a lot of things happen in this kitchen that I was like, I was very confused by. I was like, how many people are just stomping in and out of this kitchen wanting to talk to the cook? Why do so many people stomp in and out wanting to talk to the cook? I would imagine that living in a castle, people have like so many other things to do. And yet there would be scenes where this dude would literally talk to a chain of like 5 people coming in and out of his kitchen. And I'm going, where are you all coming from? Why is this happening? There were moments where it felt very much like the writer was enacting some sort of strange, like, revenge fantasy against people who had made fun of them or had said things to people they cared about. It just didn't feel rooted in the story, if that makes sense. Like, for example, there would be somebody who got beaten up for being gay. And as a member of the LGBTQ community, definitely think that that's kind of bullshit. In this story, the guy gets beaten up, and our chef goes over to the Knights barracks and threatens a bunch of them and like basically says he's going to beat up whoever did it, does beat up whoever did it. This is a cook, by the way. And it just so happens that he was trained when he was younger by a guy who knows how to fight. So he knows how to fight, but like in kind of like a kung fu type fashion. And then the guy gets knocked out, and as he is addressing the rest of the audience, the guy that he beat up tries to get up to stab him, and this girl hits him in the head with a frying pan and then starts screaming at the rest of the knights. And it's like, I don't know, the whole thing was just very, it could have been funny. It just wasn't written in a way where it felt like it might have been taking itself a little bit too seriously. I feel like that's the best way I can explain it, is it didn't feel like it was explaining this whole thing with kind of this wink and a nudge. It felt like it was just doing it to be able to say, hey, see what happened to this guy for being mean to a gay guy. And it's like, yes, but also I'm kind of taken out of the story by how hard we were trying to lean into this revenge fantasy. So yeah, it was kind of hard to read. It was long as well. It was almost 500 pages. The only thing that got me through it, I think, is that I felt these 500 pages went by pretty quickly, but I did have a couple times where I was definitely looking at how far along I was and thinking, ugh, still haven't gotten very far. So it was a little difficult to enjoy, frankly. But there were moments that I did like. I did actually very much enjoy the scene that I told you that I blew pretty hard out of my nose for. It's a scene where a bunch of guys are sitting around drinking and talking, and they start playing their own version of Truth or Dare. I did feel that some of the political intrigue was very interesting. And there was still something about the writing that made me root for the main character. Like, I still wanted him to do well. And he's grumpy. And I like grumpy main characters because I'm kind of a grump myself. So there were things to enjoy. It would definitely not be one that I would continue to read, and I'm not interested in reading the rest of the series. But some of you may definitely want to check it out. It has an over 4 rating on Goodreads, so I'm sure that there are people out there who would love it, but not me. I wound up giving this one a 2.5 as well. Next up, things started to look up a little bit in that I moved on to book 5 of the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, The Butcher's Masquerade, and this one was definitely Matt Dinniman kind of moving back into his element. It was much easier to follow, much more fun. I felt like the culmination at the end was super fascinating and super interesting. I thought that he did an amazing job of mixing poignancy and action. There were definitely times where I laughed In this one, Carl and his cat Princess Donut are sent to the rainforest, or like the jungle basically, and they spend all of their time trying to get ready for this final fight that's going to happen at this party called the Butcher's Masquerade, which is the name of the book. And it's a lot of fun. There are a lot of things that I enjoyed. Probably my favorite part, and again, I will not give this away, I try to keep these spoiler free, but my favorite part would be their pet Mongo reaches sexual maturity during this book. And yeah, Donut's reaction is probably one of my favorite things. So I did a lot of laughing, a lot more laughing in this one. I had a lot more fun listening to it. I was not sitting there going, what? And having to rewind a lot. Had a lot of fun. So this one actually wound up getting 4 stars out of me. Up until that point, it was probably the best book I'd read all February. So it was not the best altogether. I'm going to get to that, but it was one of the best. Next up was My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite. I think that's how you say it. A very popular book, actually. And I don't remember what brought me there. I think it might have been Books that feel like this, that subreddit. Might have been a thriller subreddit. Somewhere someone had suggested this book and it came up. And for those of you wondering like why things are constantly going all over the place, it's because to keep things interesting, because I'm ADHD AF and really need something to kind of like keep things interesting. I don't go in order. I have a TBR and then I randomize it. And so what happens is when I get to 50% of whatever book it is, I go ahead and I use the randomizer and it tells me what book to read next. And so this one came up. And I know that this is a pretty popular book at the moment, and I can see why. I would not say it is my favorite book, but I would say that it was entertaining. I did have a good time reading it. All of the chapters are very short. It's a very short book. I think it's like 200 and some odd pages. It is told from the vantage point of a woman living in Lagos in Africa, and her sister is a serial killer. She's very pretty, she's vain, she's narcissistic, she is completely disinterested in other people's problems. And our main character, Korede, I hope I'm saying that correctly, is raised in this household where she has been taught her entire life that she is responsible for her younger sister, and she is responsible for her younger sister's safety, for her learning, for her protection. And there are some things that happen in their past that show that this is something that she takes super seriously. And because of this, her younger sister is always calling her after she kills someone. And even though Korede has this feeling that these deaths are not by accident, as Ayula, is her sister's name, as Ayula swears, she continues to help her. And things really kind of heat up when a doctor who Korede is in love with, or really at least has like a major crush on, falls in love with her sister. And it's a really, really interesting look, I think, into parentification of children. Some of these older attitudes towards sisters and towards girls born in kind of archaic communities, the attitude people have towards beauty, the idea of protecting oneself versus protecting your family, all very, very interesting points that are made in this book. And in few words, there are some chapters that are literally like 3 lines long. It's really fun to read. The only complaint that I had, and here is where I am going to spoil just a little, so if you don't want to hear it, just fast forward like a minute or two, is that I felt that the ending kind of undid everything we read. I'll leave it at that, but I feel like, you come to the end and you're like, I just read this whole story and I'm not quite sure why. So that kind of took away from it for me. This would have been, I think, a 4-star book, but I wound up knocking off half because of the ending. So it wound up being a 3.5-star book for me, but I could think of some people I would recommend this to, and there is no promise that I wouldn't have a moment where I felt like reading it again. It just probably would not be a favorite of mine forever, and I could see myself kind of forgetting it existed before I stumbled on it again. It's not a book that I feel like I'm going to carry with me forever, but I could see some people liking it for sure. And now we come to what for me was the best book I read all of February. The book is called The September House by Carissa Orlando. This one I think was actually suggested to me by Goodreads because they had like this list of books that were good for, I think, Halloween or October. And this was on there. And boy, am I glad I read it. It's so good. It's hard because there are so many things that I would like to say, but there are so many twists and turns to this book that I feel like I would be giving things away by telling you too much. What I will tell you is that when I read what the book was about, I thought it was going to be more of a sitcom. And I was like, I can't see how you could write this book and not be funny. Basically, what it's about is it is about a woman named Margaret who lives in a house that is haunted. And it kind of answers that question. If you were to stumble upon a home that was perfect, exactly what you were looking for within your budget or even under budget, but it was haunted, but you just found out there were horrible murders there, would you stay? And it always depends on who the person is, how they're going to answer that. Well, Margaret says yes. Margaret and her husband purchase this house and very quickly find out that the house is haunted and that all of the hauntings get worse every September. House starts bleeding, ghosts start showing up even more, they become worse and worse. And as if that's not enough, her husband disappears while she is trying to figure out how to make life happen without her husband, which she's doing very well, might I add. Her daughter finds out about it and decides that she's going to come visit in September. So the rest of this book is her trying to make life make sense to someone who has not lived through this and also not look crazy throughout the entire month of September. This book was so well written, so well written. It definitely did not take itself too seriously. There was definitely humor. There was a wry wit throughout the whole thing that made me giggle multiple times. There were uncomfortable moments that happened. But she described them in such a way that I could see them like a movie, and it was so much fun to watch. The conversation, the dialogue was very realistic. I never once felt like I was reading something that a writer wrote. It sounded like I was listening to two people talking. The descriptions of the ghosts were accurately creepy, like perfectly creepy, and very dark. The humor was just off the wall at times, dark at others, but there was such this undercurrent of strength and talk of strength and description of what strength really is, especially when it comes to women. And I will say, just as kind of a massive trigger warning, because this has a lot to do with the book, that there is a lot of discussion of domestic violence and child murder, actually. So if those things are not your scene, don't bother with this book. But otherwise, I finished the book and remember saying out loud, damn, that was good. That is definitely going to go on my list of books that when I get a chance to buy physical copies, I will be buying a physical copy. It was so good, so much fun to read, absolute 100% favorite. The only other thing that I will say, and this isn't really a spoiler because it doesn't tell you anything, what I will say is that I had this moment where I was hoping that the ending would be something, and she made it look like it was something else, and I was very disappointed. And I was actually thinking like, ugh, like this book was a fun ride, but I probably won't buy it now that I see that it is this ending. And then she flipped it on me and it became the exact ending I was hoping for. So absolutely love this book. Cannot suggest enough that you should read it. 5 out of 5 stars for me. Loved it, loved it, loved it. And then things took another dip. I wound up reading, and I know I want to make it clear, this is going to be a hot take for some. Some people are going to think that I am like making stuff up or that I just have the worst taste. And I apologize if this means something to you. Please know that I tried. I read The Gunslinger by Stephen King. It's the first book in the Dark Tower series. Guys, what are we doing? Like, what was this? I wanted to love this book. I wanted to because I love Stephen King. He was very inspirational and motivational, and a huge influence to me in my in growing up. I had so much love for it. I wanted to love this book, and it was hard for me to get through. It was a slog. The language was way too purple. I don't do purple prose. I can put up with some of it, but it was just too much. There were a lot of moments where I caught myself reading a paragraph, realized that this entire paragraph was describing a building, and wound up skipping to the end of that paragraph and into the next one just because I was like, that's too much description. Like, I really didn't need that much. The dialogue was weird, but I think that was by design. I wasn't quite sure what was happening. Like, I kind of got the idea that this gunslinger was chasing after the man in black, a man in black, and that he was trying to make his way to a tower. But I had no idea what the importance was of any of it. There was a boy that was part of the story, but then the boy is not there by the end of the story. It's not by surprise. I just don't want to give anything away. But it's just one of those things where, as I was reading it, I'm going, I feel like this is a book awash in symbolism, and it's trying too hard. And it felt way too much like I was trying too hard. It felt way too much like it was trying to get me to pull it apart and to want to look deeper into the lore and the symbolism. And that's not what I felt. I just felt frustrated. I was just like, I am not enjoying this. This is not fun for me. So essentially, really what it came down to for me is I did not have fun reading this book. And the only reason I finished it is because A, peer pressure. A lot of people were saying they loved it and I wanted to be able to say the same. And B, because it at least moved fairly quickly. I was surprised by how short this book was. So I was able to kind of finish it. But by the time I finished it, I was just sitting there like, why did I do that? I have had people who are very interested in this series tell me that they tell people all the time not to start with the first book, that the second book is where you should start. A lot of people were like, you just got to try it. You get to the second book, it'll be so much better, I promise. So I did put it on my TBR. Like I said, my TBR is randomized. I don't know when I'm going to get to it, but I will give that a shot just because maybe I'm missing something. But I wound up giving this book a 2.5. And I feel like that was kind of being generous, honestly. The action sequences were interesting enough. I did think that those were neat. And I felt like some of the lore was fascinating enough for me to want to look it up later to better understand it. But I didn't like it. I didn't like it, guys, I'm sorry. And finally, I finished up the month with the 6th Dungeon Crawler Carl book, The Eye of the Bedlam Bride. I am almost caught up. There are going to be 8 books out as of May, so I am finishing one more next month, and then I have 2 months to wait. So if you're like, more Dungeon Crawler Carl, listen, I'm almost done, so chill. But Eye of the Bedlam Bride was probably my 3rd favorite book in the series. The 1st and 2nd took 1 and 2 respectively, and then 3rd would be this book. I felt like it was Dinniman back to his funniest. There were a lot of moments that I laughed out loud. There was a definite understanding of local folklore. He used local folklore, but like put a spin on it where it was kind of bastardized because this was made by aliens. It was a lot of fun to listen to. Samantha was at her funniest. Donut was at her funniest. And yet there was still this found family poignancy underneath everything that I really appreciated. It had some talk about childhood trauma. It was still able to balance that poignancy with the action, adventure, comedy side of things. And I love when people are able to do that. And Dinniman does it very well. And you know, one thing that I wanted to say about this series, the reason that I'm loving it so much is because I think no matter what your take is on his writing, on his stories, he is creative as hell. All of his books are so creative. He thinks about things and they are so convoluted that I'm like, how does a brain go in all these directions? And it's so impressive. I love his work just for that reason. Now, I actually do get his sense of humor and I get his storytelling and I very much enjoy it. But even if I didn't, I would have to have a certain amount of appreciation for how creative this man is. He's very, very good at getting you interested in what he does. So this book was kind of also playing off of the idea of card games of like Yu-Gi-Oh! And Magic the Gathering. I don't play those, but it kind of played off of those where people would have to fight using cards. The Bedlam bride of the title is a truly terrifying and frustrating character. There was just a lot to like. And the only thing that I would say that kind of takes away from these books is you could tell that Matt gets a little wrapped up in his anti-capitalist ranting. And not saying there's anything wrong with being anti-capitalist. I'm gonna say that I get it. But whenever anybody goes on like a really long rant that you can tell is the author's opinion, that tends to take away, I feel, from the book. That's part of the reason. Remember I said Terry Goodkind used to be one of my favorite writers? That's why he's not anymore. Every single one of his books was some sort of Ayn Randish, and I don't know if I said it right and I don't care, complaint. And it would go on for like paragraphs. And I'm like, this is not necessary. We don't need to do this. So that kind of would get a little bit much, but it was not enough to take me out of the story. And it was enough for, I could look over it. I could overlook it. So this book actually wound up getting a 4.5 for me. Absolutely loved this one. Kind of sad that I'm going to be on the last book of the series next month, and then I don't have anything else Dungeon Crawler Crawl to look forward to until I think it's May 12th is when the last one comes out. I do have that pre-ordered though, so looking forward to talking about that. And those are the books I read for February. Like I said, not a good month. So I'm really hoping that March is going to look up. We'll see. And wish me no more DNFs. I am really excited for it, and I will tell you guys about that obviously when I can. So if you have any other books that you'd like to suggest that I take a look at, please recommend them to me. I'm always down to add more to my TBR. Let me know what you think. Let me know if any of these books really spoke to you in the comments, and check out that Patreon I told you about. Hope to see you guys in the next one, and you guys have an amazing rest of your week. See you in the next one.